There has been a lot of buffs throughout Brawl Stars' entire history, but there are a couple of them that truly stand out. Certain changes that absolutely broke the game and just completely destroyed the meta. And today we're looking to all of those changes, more specifically the top 10 changes that completely broke the meta. And this also includes gadgets additions, reworks, and hypercharge introductions. So I am pretty sure that a couple of you might already guess two persons that are already on this list. So hope you enjoy the video, and let's start with the top 10, which is Amber. Now Amber on December of 2023, she actually got her damage buffed by 10%, which compared to nowadays, it's in and around 4.8% extra damage. Now, the issue that this also had was that this also buffed her Dancing Flames gadget, and Amber just became absolutely uncounterable. If she couldn't burst you down with her basic attack insane damage, which was kinda rare, she would just obliterate you with her second gadget. These two buffs combined made Amber just insanely broken. She would shred through anyone that would come in her path. Combined with the super damage over time, it was truly insane just how much damage Amber could deliver so fast. The only reason why I don't place her higher, it was because she wasn't exactly the best brawler in the game, and she was somewhat decent even before the buff, because there were even more impactful changes than this one, trust me. So, in 9th place we have Carl, and his 2022, yes, that was a really long time ago, in June buff, where they increased his projectile speed by 15.8%. Now, if you know Carl, there are three things that you should never touch in him: range, projectile speed, and damage. These in Carl, it's just absurdly strong. And they buffed because Carl was in a pretty mediocre spot, and before this buff they even tried to buff him in 3 different ways, but neither one of them helped. So he was in and around the C tier, but this single buff made Carl the best brawler in the game. So as you can expect, he got nerfed. While Amber, it took her 3 months to get nerfed, it only took 2 to Carl, so this kinda proves that Carl was stronger, kinda, and he was insanely good back then. But there were even stronger buffs than this one in history. So let's go to the next one, which is Gale. Now, I'm talking more specifically about the 2024 Gale buff on August, where they increased his super damage from 1220 to 1440. Now, this by itself wasn't the biggest thing in the world, but with every single damage buff, there is also a charge rate buff, and in this specific patch, he also received a 34% recharge rate buff. Now, on this time, Gale actually had a very weird bug, something combined with the hypercharge. I don't really know why it happened, but essentially, you could get hit by Gale's super twice in a row. And this was a very weird thing, and it had to do something with the hypercharge shooting 2 supers probably. So, when they fixed that bug, they for some reason thought Gale deserved a damage buff to the super, so they gave him. And that made Gale the single best tank counter in the game. Range, slow, the most annoying super, and an insanely broken hypercharge. It was truly disgusting, really. Next, in 7th place, we have Shelly. More specifically, her 2023 movement speed buff. It wasn't just 1 level of extra speed, it was 2. She went from normal all the way to very fast. And as you can expect, with every single brawler, if they got anything even remotely close to this amount of extra speed, they would become insanely broken. And same thing happened with Shelly. I don't blame them for trying to make Shelly a lot faster, and it was a really good idea, but Shelly went from being the worst brawler in the game to being one of the best. The only reason why she wasn't the best, it was because the meta where we were, it was kinda toxic. Not because a brawler was just absurdly broken, but because there were, exactly if I remember correctly, 10 or 8 brawlers that were just everywhere. And Shelly was one of them, and one of the strongest. And ever since that buff, Shelly has received practically nothing except for nerf. Her HP, her star power, her movement speed then got nerfed, which, why honestly? Her recharge rate, her hypercharge got nerfed. Ever since that massive speed buff, Shelly has received nothing but nerfs, which maybe looking at her today might be time to reconsider that, honestly. You know what else you should reconsider? Subscribing to the channel! And while you're doing that, keep watching more videos in the channel. I'm sure you will enjoy them. And while you're doing that, join our Discord server as well. Link in the description. Thank you so much, and let's keep going with the video. Next, in 6th place, we have Lou. And Lou, I could actually go for 2 moments. I could either go with the 2023 in October, his introduction of the hypercharge, which absolutely broke him, or I could go with a more recent approach, which was the 2024 December reload speed buff. Me personally, I think that the reload speed was by far the most surprising one and the most effective of them all. So yeah, I'm gonna go for the reload speed. That thing just made Lou surprisingly broken. I think that I talk for most people that no one really expected a reload speed buff to make Lou the best character in the game or very close to being it, especially at a time where the meta just simply favored him so much. That combined with the easy to get hypercharge and a stun on the basic attack that you now reload so much faster, it just made Lou unbearable to deal with. Not to mention that his damage was pretty good as well, so there were just so many good things about Lou. And even today he's still a really good brawler because of this buff, so it would be a crime to not include Lou in this list, honestly. Next, in 5th place, this might or not surprise you, but we have Hank, and with his most recent introduction of the hypercharge on the update where this video is being released. So his hypercharge just essentially make everything that was already potentially broken about Hank just obnoxious to deal with. He can deal so much damage, he can be insanely tanky, and he can heal all by himself. Not to mention that the super deals an absurd amount of damage if you get too close to it. So he has this insane area control that just simply does not allow any enemy to get close to him, unless it has some sort of cancel ability like a stun or a knockback. The reason why I don't actually place Hank higher, because I do believe that he is broken. He is the single most broken brawler to ever exist in football overtime, but that is a very specific moment, not to mention that he's just so insanely reliant on the hypercharge that without it, it's nothing really that amazing. And if you want it to be a lot more amazing, you most of the times need to combine Hank with a really good healer, which there are a lot right now. So because of all of these factors, I don't really think that Hank deserves to be much higher on this list. Definitely appearing in the list, but not in the top 3. So Hank, insanely good, the hypercharge did so much for him, but not as much as a couple of the ones that we have on top of this list. In 4th place, this might surprise you, but we have Squeak and his 2022 April buff to his second gadget. So you know that his second gadget, it shows bushes, plus, and most importantly, it slows enemies down and it lasts for 6 seconds. Pretty good and annoying gadget. Obviously slightly overshadowed by how much damage the first gadget deals now, I know. But for most of its lifespan, this was the better gadget. And now imagine that when it got released, it didn't slow enemies, but it lasted 15 seconds. The gadget was absolutely useless because why would you want to see a tiny area of bushes with Squeak? Made absolutely no sense. So Supercell decided to give it a slow effect. Now I know what you're already thinking. Yeah, a slowing area for 15 seconds, it's the most insanely broken thing ever, because you would have such an amazing area control of the map, it would be just too much. Well, in this exact same patch, they increased the gadget duration to 20 seconds. Yeah, Squeak could control an area of the map for an entire freaking minute. Just as a reminder, back then there was no gadget gear, so it wasn't that big of a deal, but man, controlling an area for a whole minute and the slow was just so obnoxious. I mean, Squeak was just unbearable to deal with, and he was emergency nerfed like 2 weeks after the buff, so this just shows how impactful this buff really was. In third place we have Mr. P and his Hypercharge. Man, this Hypercharge, it's almost a game over. I was winning certain strategic zone games like by 70%, 30%. And then bro just got the Hypercharge and we lost! The Hypercharge penguins are the most insanely annoying thing in the world. Like, 2 porters would already be good, but 2 Hypercharge porters, that's just madness. And it came at a very, very unfortunate time where Mr. P can now also spam the hell out of his gadgets, and it's just so toxic. And in comparison to Hank, you don't really need the assistance of a healer to get value. Obviously you can use Mr. P everywhere, but neither can you use Hank unless you have a healer. And because Mr. P can handle kinda the situation by himself, once he gets that Hypercharge, man, it's just game over. So because of this single Hypercharge and also the gadget changes, all of those factors together made Mr. P an insanely broken brawler. Next, in second place, we have Frank. And if you remember correctly, Frank received a rework where he would now attack faster by up to 70% based on how little HP he had. Frank received in and around 11 nerfs, if I am correct, and one of them was an emergency nerf. And to this day, Frank is still at least an A-tier brawler. It was a very unfortunate timing again, because he received the Hypercharge at that moment. So not only he received one of the strongest reworks in the game, as he also received one of the strongest Hypercharges in the game. So both of those things at the same time, yeah, you can already guess what happened. Frank became insanely broken. It was just impossible to deal with. 100% bonus damage on the gadget, the star power, the Hypercharge, the HP, the damage. It was just so much. Combine that with the healer and you could very well just give up. The only thing that didn't make Frank just so much worse was that we had Clancy at that time. And Clancy was also very, very broken. So the only reason why Frank was just not absurdly unbearable to deal with was because there were proper answers back then, but Frank, regardless of the situation, he was insanely broken, and at that time, you could use him anywhere. Just combine him with the healer and you could have Frank on the sniper map. It would work. So before we move to the top 1 most broken change in Brawl Stars, we have some honorable mentions of brawlers that almost made it to this list. And first we have Fang 2023 December, when his Hypercharge got introduced. Didn't get into the list because he was already really strong before even receiving the Hypercharge. So the Hypercharge didn't really buff him that much, it just made him absurdly broken. Therefore, I reached the conclusion that he didn't deserve to be on this list. We also have Edgar as well, 2023 December, where he also got his Hypercharge. I feel like he was already starting to become a much better brawler, and the Hypercharge was a really, really good buff, but in my eyes the Amber buff was more impactful, mainly because also how short-lived it was, that buff. And speaking of short-lived, we have Ash 2022 March, where his Rotten Banana gadget was added. Imagine the gadget being so broken that it got nerfed the next day. That was just how crazy the gadget was, and because it just literally lasted 1 day, I decided it was not worth it to put in the list as well. We also have Penny 2022 after her full rework, because there were just so many changes and I wanted to focus this video more onto one or at maximum two buffs or one addition to their kit. Because Penny had so many changes, it felt like it would be too much, it would take too much time to explain all of those changes, so in the end I decided to not put her in the list. And finally we have Daryl 2021 December, where whenever he rolled he would have a 90% shield, and that made him the best brawler in the game. But funnily enough, we have another moment where he was insanely broken, which is a way much more recent one, which was the 2024 August buff, where he now had 2 supers. Honestly, he felt in both of those cases severely overrated. It only took one tiny nerf to... tiny, it's a bit of an exaggeration, but in both of those cases it only took one simple nerf to Daryl to make him balanced or back to the F tier after a while. So it just shows how weak those buffs were in a long-term game. So I decided yet to not put either one of these two moments of Daryl being broken in this list. And finally, in first place for most broken buff in Brawl Stars history, we actually have Surge, where they increased his super range from 0 tiles to 3.33. So essentially, before this buff, whenever you jumped, you would just stay in the same place. But this was also because back then he had the teleportation gadget, and it was just fundamentally a busted gadget that would never be able to be replaced like a bunch of other gadgets, so I don't really know why they didn't rework a bunch of other brawlers, but we're getting sidetracked. So why was this single change so broken? Well, essentially, your super charged double or recharged double the amount. So this meant that hitting your super to only one enemy already made so that you needed less 1 ammo to get your super. So if you hit 2 people with your super, you only needed 1 single ammo to get the super. And a tiny important detail is that you can reload ammo while in the air, so that means that you can still get ammo, more ammo. And then both of his gadgets were absurdly broken. His first gadget gave him 2 levels instead of 1, and his third gadget, instead of lasting 2 seconds, it lasted 5. Instead of giving 2 ammo, he gave 3, and instead of protecting 50%, it protected 80%. So not only you would get an insane cycle of supers, both of your gadgets, no matter what, were insanely broken, and you would just be flying all over the place. No one, and I mean no one, could counter you. He got emergency nerfed, but only like 2 weeks later, and I don't know how it took that long, because it was unbearable. He was just always jumping. He became Miko essentially, but with knockback. Like, in my eyes, that was the most single broken buff in history. Well, so there you have it. That is my top 10 most broken changes in Brawl Stars history. Hope you enjoyed. If you like, do not forget to subscribe, watch more videos in the channel, and join our Discord server. There is currently happening the Faroli skin giveaway happening, so make sure to join the Discord so that you can have an opportunity to get this skin, the profile picture, and the icon as well. Do all of that stuff. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video.